So then last thing that we'll talk about is, share some strategies on how to design or generate authentic assessment. We want to get a sense of who's in the room on how well are you guys used to using AI tools. So there will be some couple of questions. So the QR code, and then that takes you to the survey. So if you want to take a minute, people on Zoom, take a minute or two just to answer the question, just so we know who is in the room. Let's give the result and see how we are. 5% did say they have used it really. 5 said they have never used it, and 1% said they have, and then sometimes 4 people said that. So we have a good range here of about 10 people that are pretty much familiar with. So some of the initial reactions when ChatGPT was released in November 23rd, 2022, feels like 10 years ago. So there are some schools planning to the conversation about is this gonna take the job of teaching? Is it gonna replace us? Why? But there are some needs. You all will see that the conversation was quickly shifting to how higher education need to think about this impact, and there's a need to shift how we think about the entire process of learning. So to help us, we will talk about very simple definition of generative AI and how it works, so that we have a very fundamental understanding of what we're talking about. So what is generative AI? Anything that can anybody throw out any phrase, any words that you can think about? What comes to mind when you think about generative AI? Go ahead.
You type in some amount of text and it gives you back something from its machine learning.
Okay, good. That gives some kind of response from inputs. Good. Anybody else? Okay. Let's go on. So I want to take some time to differentiate between artificial intelligence and generative AI. So if you think about artificial intelligence, outer circle, you think about Amazon, right? How it's using some of your data, some of your personal data, your shopping data to predict your shopping habits, right? If you think about Amida, how it's taking your text and predicting how effective or ineffective some of your writings are and helping you to correct the grammar. If you think about, Siri or Alexa, how it's taking your voice input and helping to answer some of the questions, some of your queries that you might have. So these are very different from how generative AI works. Alexa, Siri have been before ChatGPT, right? But what was different in ChatGPT with generative AI was that you can type in some text and it can respond to you in like conversational manner. And that was huge. And that was mind-blowing. We have never seen that before. And that is why, tools like generative AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, and there's several others that use this kind of framework to exist. And then we also have what we call some other large language models, which are also included in this as well. They are more like, chatbots. For example, if you have someone on a website, you see somebody popping up on your left or right side of the screen asking questions. So those are like chatbots that they just want to have those text-based conversations. So how does this tool really work? I think I mentioned some of the generative AI. So it's all about predictions. So it is predicting the next word. Looking at its entire database is predicting what's going to come next. So if you go one more step. So for example, if you look at this text, so if you have a fragment of text that says, "I like my bagel with," so it's going on the web and searching for what is the most common next word somebody else has used before. And then if you say, "I like my bagel with," for example, cream. And that's the way, so it's working by prediction. And these are very elaborate algorithms that are making this thing work. So it's taking these fragments and looking for the most likely next word. So it's just adding one word at a time. So there's no magic. It doesn't have any mind. It doesn't think. It's just using word prediction. So this one. So fun fact. So you can see on this chart here, and this is showing the apps or tools that got 100 million users. It took Netflix that long to get to 100 million users. And it took ChatGPT just 2 months. That's just to show you the scale at which these two just blew out of proportion. And you can see the other tools, even Facebook and YouTube, they are very, very low in that role. So some prompting tools before I hand over the session to Wally. So some prompting ideas that we have found to work, and this was some of the framework that a very popular writer Bowen wrote a book on AI for educators. So he did recommend some framework that is very helpful. So what is prompting? Just like you said, that's all prompting is about. It's about giving the model an instruction, something you want it to do. So the clearer your instruction, then the better the output. So if you think about being clear, providing some reference text, sometimes I have seen people copy some text and put it in ChatGPT and say use this format or use this style or use this language. Then it can mimic that really easily. When you are if you are trying to do some complex tasks, it is highly recommended to break the tasks into chunks. So for example, let's say you want to write a paper. Okay, you can say, I'm writing a paper on how to build a group, for example. So give it an idea to first write an outline. What are some of the key things that you think I need to think about when I'm writing this paper? Then copy the outline and say, then develop this more. So you break the task into smaller chunks. It has been seen that it's more effective when the task is broken down into chunks. So that's a very good idea as well. So use appropriate phrases and words. So if you're in the area of engineering, use engineering terminologies. It can pull in some of this information. So this is a very good framework. This is something like we got from so when you are writing a prompt, think about the role. Give it the context. Because imagine generative AI, they are just out there. They are just in the wide world. So what context do you want it to frame these ideas? So give it the context, give it the role. Okay, as an expert instructor in biology, for example, as an expert astronomer, for example. So give it a role, give it the context, and then give it a task. What exactly do you want it to do? Then give some requirements. How do you want it to do the task, right? Then give it, how do you want the output to look like? Do you want it in a text, in a table, in a graphic, in a picture? Give it those specific things, and then it helps you to give out a better idea. So an example of a prompt. So if you look at, these are different prompts, examples. If you look at this very first prompt, okay, we take ChatGPT, write me a paragraph of why group work is important. That's very general, very, very streamlined. But if you improve the prompt and then you add in an experienced teacher, then it gives you a better prompt. And if you want to even get a better output, then so the more specific you are, the more clearer you are, then the better your output will be.
Are you doing prompts? Do you have an example of prompts you've already used? Do you use this kind of framework, not really knowing that it's there, but what's the difference when you say those extra words? You shook your head.
I mean, so I've just been experimenting a little bit. I guess I'm learning that as I am more, hey, could you do this? Write a 10-minute talk on this example from this perspective. Could you write a talk into some talking examples that might be better than outline that? I think it's better than if I just say, hey, do this one thing with very little context.
Context is really important.
Yes.
I think about it like, even as a teacher, if you don't give the students context, they don't know what they're doing. And I don't want to say ChatGPT is our student, but they're learning, or it's learning. I hate to call it in person. Anyone else? Ideas on prompts? What have they found?
I feel like I've been doing words often. Like this is why I've been.
When you think about those fours with the squares around there, what you need to do, and then tying it back to the original title of this, human driven. The more you give it the human input, who you are, what you're expecting, what specifically, that's where you as a human are driving it. And I know I see that there's some session on course design, like telling ChatGPT design my course. No, you're designing the course using ChatGPT to help you with some different tasks. Because that's the whole point of this. You do parts of it, but it's still you. That's where I come in. And Amida is very excited about it. And of course, it says those same things too, but he knows all the back end. I just know the human part of it. That yes, I struggle with ideas. I'll go talk to colleagues. I will do a Google search, like what are the other universities doing, teaching this class or whatever. But delving into a little ChatGPT is lots of fun too, but you take it based on you're the one that's making the final decisions. So this is my third section, strategies for creating authentic assessments, academic activities, a big thing of like what we like to talk about. Authentic assessments are so important, and this doesn't have to do with ChatGPT. This is just about teaching pedagogy, showing the students examples of how things they're learning in classes apply to their real life. You always hear about math. I'll never use calculus again in my life, but I have a colleague, we have a colleague that he tells the story of when he was like 40 years old and had to build his deck. All of a sudden, he had to remember geometry and calculus and all this stuff. So trying to point these things out to students and creating this assignments that are real world for them and not, trying, you can't, if you've got 200 students in your class, you can't do it uniquely to each one, but give them an opportunity. ChatGPT can help with that. So here's a few types of authentic assessments, like case studies. Even if it's a made up person for the case, at least it's looking at what your role is with this case study, doing research projects where they're out in the field, interviewing people, pulling up soil samples, whatever, presentations, portfolios. I just asked ChatGPT really quickly. I need 10 types for college students. Probably a worse kind of thing. Then I said, oh, I need 10 more, and it gave me 10 more. But if I did a better prompt, I would say I am teaching an undergraduate course in chemistry, and I'm looking for, more specific, going through that framework. So there's my 10 more. And I said with descriptions. So I just add a little on. Just as I've been hearing here, you try one and then you add a few more on. So then it gave me, just for the slide, I kept it short. And Nina said you can't have so much text on the slide. Well, like number 11 design challenges, it gave that description. And then it had 4 bullet points of what some design challenges could be. So it'll give you a lot depending on what you ask for. So those are some ideas.
Thank you.
Again, this is a fun and new Bloom's taxonomy revisited. And on our slide, the picture is linked, and I think they're putting the slides up on the website so you can click on the image there. And really hard to see with the lights here, but here's like to create, recommended is to revise that AI capabilities. This column will give you AI things, one of those main Bloom categories, and then distinctive human skills here. So we're giving some different ideas. We always talk about when you put your objectives down for your assignment, what are they specifically? What do you want the students to be able to do to show they've completed this objective? And so this helps give you some ideas on that. So an example of an assignment, and if I chose this analyze section here, it'll fill in an idea of using the research project that ChatGPT said could be an authentic assignment. And then we're working on exoskeletons, which is kind of a creepy thing. So how do you make it authentic? Looking at your community and local. So the next slide here is just like, how can GenAI help me? That's the first thing you ask. What is your assignment objective? What do you want them to be able to do? And what will they Will they create something? Will they devise a matrix about the exoskeleton? What is it? What kind of help do I need? You know, will Google help? Will my colleague, maybe my partner I'm teaching with? Where else can I get some help? What are some of the ideas for the research projects? What would be the details? So I build them, so I find them out. And so then how can GenAI help with ideas and getting all of that started? So those are the questions that you need to ask before you jump right away to design this assignment for you. Why do I need that? I already know a research project. Now you know I want them to be able to analyze some things. Do I need some help for some ideas? Then over there, you mentioned you do it with recipe planning or meal planning. I mean, it helps. You know, there's reasons for doing this, but think that through before you take that next step to starting to write that out. So let's say I agree, I need that help. So here's my first prompt, kind of things like just quickly, not really thinking a lot about the framework as much as I should. So I do what Amida says, I define who I am, a biology instructor, even though I'm not really. But this is an example. Design a research project for students to demonstrate the exoskeleton and why it's important in the water areas of their community. So those were on the previous slide, kind of the basics of what I thought about, but it doesn't give ChatGPT a lot. So let's see what I did say. I was an expert, so I did that part of it. I said I want the students to demonstrate something, and I got the authentic part, areas like where it is, areas in their community. I got something with it, but then I thought, hey, I better do this a little better and talk about that whole framework. So I'm an expert biology instructor teaching the undergraduate students. So now I'm getting a little more specific to the context. They're a public research university. So I'm not at a community college level. This is like a research university. We really want the students to learn more about what true research is. I'm not saying community colleges don't do that, but you look at the skill level. Design a research to demonstrate the exoskeleton and why it's important in the water area. And then specifically what it is. This is a semester-based activity over 3 months with a group of 3 students. So it's not like the whole class, but they'll work in a trio with the 3 students. So giving the prompt a little more direction. And as you move along, you'll kind of add a few things on here. And I think I have an example. So it gave me 3 projects as examples, which were kind of interesting. Fetal health, the role in food webs, and then pollution. So kind of 3 different areas. There was a whole lot more, like there was a whole page of what project 1 would look like that gave me. So let's go to the next slide. And so I pulled out project 3. It gives a description on that, which looks pretty nice. It wasn't my word, so it wrote those words up, but is that how I would explain it to my students? So it's kind of a nice start on that. And the pollution really fits in with the chapter that I'm working on, or the whole course, what the theme of this course is. So then what would I do next? And I probably have that a couple of slides for now. So what would you do with this? Thinking about what I've talked about, that it's human driven. I did a nice prompt, but still all of this is GenAI writing it out. What would be your next step if this was yours? Ideas? Yeah.
I mean, as the expert, you know, that you're claiming to be, I guess, just build, right? You would probably go through and fix maybe some of the, to make it more clear and make it more accessible to your students, I would imagine.
I like that clarity and accessible. Maybe some of the words are too high of a level that, you know, these are undergraduate students at the research university, but it's maybe their first year here. Let's go in more detail, explain it. Maybe review the title. would assessing the effects, does that sound like a research paper in grad school, or does that sound like an undergrad example? Great, those are good ideas. Exoskeleton was Amida's idea as well. Let's go to the next one. So then this was sort of more my area, even though I'm not nursing, but you're a nursing professor, so same thing, and I get another authentic assessment type or activity is role playing. That is something that's really exciting, even if it's not, you aren't the role you want to be, but you like, this is a nursing professor with nursing students and they're interviewing somebody, practice listening. And so one of the students can be the patient and one of the students can be the doctor or the nurse or whatever it is. And come up with, you know, the elderly play patient, you know, the other student can be elderly, fully cognitive, and maybe somebody else could be elderly and have some mild cognitive disorder going on. Just different examples of the role playing, and it's incredible how much students learn when they do that interaction. So this is an example of putting that prompt together. Thinking of anybody here in nursing? How would I improve this? That's really good. And this thing about practice listening, kind of listening. Maybe we find that as active listening. And what does that mean? And then maybe asking them to give some descriptions of that and have that as a part of it. What could make this more authentic? Like, where are the elderly patients? So these are some of the scenarios that pulled out. And I had more there. I just threw some in. The role playing, how specifically what the patient is. Would that be something your students could, like, this is an elderly patient, please, part of the assignment would be come up with a description of who that person is, or you pretend to be an elderly person and you decide how old you are and kind of what your status is. Are you in assisted living or are you running a business on your own? That's great. Getting those words in you used in your class, and that could probably help with the prompt. But maybe this gives you the framework you need to then start making it your own. And coming up with some different ideas yourself and meeting together with colleagues so your words still make sense on who you are. This also goes back to something Amida mentioned, that you can give the GenAI an example of how you write. And say I'm a nursing educator here at NDSU, grew up in Grand Forks, or, you know, and here's an example of other scenarios I've written up. So use this to write up. Am I sharing that right?
Yeah.
So it sounds more like you, which is a little scary. It's really, you're the one who's supposed to review. All right, limitations, lots. We heard about this morning with the keynote, and we'll probably hear it again at lunch, like all the things you thought. Like one of the things I thought, what thing do you know is really false with GenAI? And I was going to raise my hand and say that it cares. And that's, I think, some of students will start getting this relationship. We have a friend that calls ChatGPT Bob. Now it's sort of like your little tutor, and it doesn't really care about you. It doesn't care that you get an A. It may give you the wrong information. So there's that lack of understanding. It looks like it's kind of superficial, like it came up with an 82-year-old elderly patient and said some nice things about that, but it's not a person. The contextual limitations, unless you really give more and more specific information about context, can't really reason or critically think. That's what we're here for, to help our students learn how to critically think. And that's a really great plus of the GenAI, because they're using that, how they can look that over and critically think about how it should be done and how to make it different and how to see that it's not true. Just like way back when we were trying to teach digital literacy and explain to students just because it's in a newspaper doesn't mean it's true. or just because it's on the internet, it's not true. This is just another stage. It kind of feels like, well, the internet, ChatGPT showed it to me. I mean, it's true. And bias and fairness, we know a lot of that. What's all the large language model? Where is it coming from?
Mm.
What is like ethnic and
Yeah.
what is that? Where is it coming from? Yeah,
Yeah, so it's building its information from the data that has been fed. So and we all know that a lot of this data has been mostly, put together by white male, so it might not represent the cultural the diverse views of everybody. So that's where the bias and fairness comes in.
quality and reliability. Yesterday, I was helping a faculty member put a banner in her course, and she teaches policing. And so she's had to come up with some keywords to ask for images. She finally, the policing just showed awful scenes, and so she didn't want that. So then she said handcuffs. Thinking, that this like you think, and it was pretty bad. So it showed pretty handcuffs. And it didn't have anything to do with policing. And so that's the kind of thing to think about what it does and the reliability. It isn't creative. It's not innovative. Well, it's innovative in that it's a new thing. And who knows what's going to happen in the future. And then this is something that we like to talk about a lot. We get these questions over at the Instructional Design Center. Okay, did this student write it with ChatGPT? How do I check? And the first explanation is take that and put it in ChatGPT to the ChatGPT detector, which doesn't really work. But what you're doing is you're taking student information and now you're feeding it into ChatGPT, and now it's part. And the student never agreed to release their privacy, their FERPA, all of that. And there's so many things about legal and privacy that we need to think about. There are so many applications out there that faculty want to use to help them be able to grade, to be able to get feedback and use AI to do it. And I just was visiting with someone last week that got really hard sales from a new company that is going to be able to grade and give feedback to where 200 process students like really fast. You give it the prompts, you give it the rubrics and all of that, but think about if you were a student in school, would you want AI to be giving you your feedback in the grade? But also think about the legal privacy. So how do we use this in good ways? And how do you measure your students so that they're understanding the ethics and the morality of it? And I don't want to sound like I'm against it. I think there's lots of fun things.
Yeah.
I should have asked for questions again.
Yeah, I mean, if I could add too, there was this research that just came out that asked students about. Students did say in that research, the Cengage research that came out, that they do not want an AI to be their teacher, so they still want that human connection. So we still need to be in that mix, and that is the idea.
And no matter what, and I know our keynote had that identity be replaced by AI. And I'm old enough that I retired from UND some years ago. Like when videotaping came out, that really dates me. Faculty thought that they're ready to be replaced by the videotape lectures. And it would just, so the students would come to the lecture hall and they'd see a videotape of their last year's. And, that did never happen. So they're not going to be replaced with AI. Still needs to be the human.
Mhm.
Questions? Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of like how to use GenAI to help grade assessments and stuff like that. I was curious your thoughts, either of you, on assessments that make sense with the knowledge of students also back into AI, right? Like what's a good way to assess knowledge that a student couldn't get around by just plugging it into an AI platform as well? Does that make sense?
It does. I think we've done some seminars with the writing center part of English department, and the more you make it personal, the more they're authentic. That's the best. That they can't come up with research from the water in Alaska when they're not living in Alaska, but it could be something, I don't know, something that relates to their life. And the more you know the students, you start getting used to their writing style. The more you do some writing in the class, it really helps because I know with colleagues, I could say, wait a minute, that email example you're putting together was all AI. That's not you. It's pretty from until the students get really good.
Yeah. I mean, and there's been some research into, making your assignments AI proof, so how do you make it that it's not, AI cannot generate the answers for them. And the very first rule is you, by yourself, just pick up your assignment and plug it in and see what comes out. And then you can easily tell by what comes out when it's then something similar. Because these models are very similar in how they put the ideas together. You can see, for example, if I use ChatGPT or if you use Gemini or if you use Copilot, you will see the general framing that, I don't think students can say this. So that's number one. And I think you mentioned a good point about, just making the assignment personal to them, so they're from their personal experiences. So that way, of course, they don't have similar experiences. Everybody will have very different experiences. And of course, AI is just a machine. So you couldn't have those experiences, you would think. So that's a good point, because everything you put into those large language models, they are using the same data to retrain the model. So there's recently ChatGPT 4, I think, has this thing that you can turn off the history. I don't know the right word to use. There's a feature there that you can turn it off that doesn't use your data to retrain the model. So that's the new feature, because people also had those concerns that, how they use the data I put in. So that's another thing that you can explore. But that's a good point.
I was also thinking, if you plug in your questions and then the student will say, what are the possible questions Dr. Amidu will ask for this topic?
Yeah.
So the questions that you plug in
Really good.
come out.
Really good point.
Yeah.
So it's about, so how do we navigate? So we are all experimenting, right? I mean, these are some research that somebody did and they said, oh, you can do this. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it works now, it doesn't work in the future. Who knows? We just keep, because this thing are moving really fast. We don't know what's going to happen in next year. Yeah, go.
I'm also curious. So let's say you before you submit you cut the homework, you're like, all right, well let's see what ChatGPT says, and you get the response back. And if a student's work does look similar to it, there's no way to prove, right, that it is or isn't. I'm curious how you would navigate that discussion of well, you can't just plagiarize check it. There's nothing you can do there really to say for sure. So you penalize them unfairly potentially, because it could be a false positive, right?
Yeah, and this is why when we started the conversation, there's a need for us to rethink, how we assess students. Probably the old model doesn't work anymore with ChatGPT. We need to rethink how assessment is, and authentic assessment is an example that could be an option, right? So you can have them do, peer reviewing, for example, where they have to review their work. So the question is, how do we want students to demonstrate their understanding? So that's a big question. So is it only by writing? Is it by playing something? Is it by demonstrating something? Is it by making something? So we need to, it's a very interesting and very creative way of assessing their understanding. It doesn't have to be writing something on paper anymore. And we have seen people just say, you know what, I'm just gonna have them come into the class and just do the test. And so we're gonna have to be creative on how we do things. And I've seen some example of faculty, for example, had students, design an assignment and had them, write the assignment and then share with your peers and then give feedback, or he asked them a question to put in ChatGPT and let them critique the output of ChatGPT and then say, oh, what is right, what is wrong about it? And very different ways that people are doing, creative way of people are using this tool. It's just a different way of assessing their understanding and not necessarily having them write things down.
Great, it's like the old model of 2 + 2 = 4, and the student was down 4. But show me how you got to it. Show me how you wrote that paper. tell me about your experience out to the lake, and you're not going to be able to if it was ChatGPT that wrote it all for them.
I had students submit work that I assumed was generated, you know, like a paper, and have found that a good rubric that actually assesses their critical thinking or their, you know, really understanding what they're writing about. The chat GPT makes it sound really nice and it's grammatically correct and all the things, but it doesn't actually, they didn't use right prompts, it doesn't actually address the things that I'm asking them to do. And so I asked like how you design your assignment, like you said, in what you're asking the students to do, but then also having a rubric that discusses those things that generative AI can't do. I didn't have to take points off, because I don't know for sure if it was AI or not, but it wasn't a very good paper. It didn't achieve the goals of what I was asking them to do.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It's been very good conversation.